Hello my dear friends and welcome to StudyIQ. I am Joyce Joy and today in this lecture we will discuss about the currency swap agreement that was signed between India and Japan recently. Let us start with the current affair. Let us analyze what is the current affair. Japan and India has entered into a 75 million currency swap agreement. So we will see later in this lecture what is currency swap agreement, then you will understand what it is. And an agreement to this effect was signed during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Japan. So this 75 billion currency swap agreement is one of the largest swap agreements in the world. Now let us see what is a currency swap agreement. Under a currency swap agreement, one country exchanges its national currency for that of another. So, it is an exchange of national currency. Now, here India has signed a currency swap agreement with Japan. So, both these countries can exchange their national currencies to each other. Now, let us understand the details of India-Japan currency swap. The recent agreement, the swap agreement that was signed between India and Japan will allow both these countries, that is India and Japan, to borrow in US dollar or the currency of the other country up to limits specified. So, now in the recent agreement, Japan and India has signed a currency swap agreement. So, both these countries can either borrow from each other in terms of US dollars or in terms of each other's currency. Suppose if Japan is borrowing from India, Japan can borrow either in terms of dollars or in terms of Indian rupee. Similarly, if India is borrowing from Japan, it can be either in terms of dollars or in terms of Japanese yen. And this agreement is for $75 billion. This means that India can acquire yen or dollars from Japan up to 75 billion in exchange for rupees. And this exchange can be reversed after an agreed period. Likewise, Japan can also seek dollars from India in exchange for yen. So this is the agreement. Now let us understand whether such agreements had existed between Japan and India in the past. Two incidents were there. One was in 2013. Japan had offered a $50 billion currency swap in 2013. And in 2008 also there was one currency swap agreement and that was for $3 billion. But both these agreements were not completely utilized in the past. So this is not the first time, this is the third time that India and Japan is entering into a currency swap agreement. Now let us understand the terms of agreement in the currency swap deal. As we have discussed, this is one of the largest swap agreements in the world. And this agreement or this facility is entered into between the central bank of the two countries. So the Central Bank of India, RBI, and the Central Bank of Japan has entered into this currency swap agreement. So this is between the central banks of the two economies. And under the agreement, the terms of the swap as well as the cost is included. Another speciality of this currency swap agreement is that the exchange rate is typically fixed for a transaction. And because the exchange rate is typically fixed for a transaction, the foreign exchange risk is mitigated. Now, coming to the finance cost. The finance cost of this currency swap will be lower because the interest is charged only on the amount drawn through the facility. So, it is not for the entire amount, but the interest is charged only on the amount that is drawn through the facility. Now coming to the most important part, that is the significance of this currency swap agreement. Why is this currency swap agreement between India and Japan important for India? Or what is the significance of it? First of all, it will help in bringing greater stability to the foreign exchange. If we have observed in the recent days, we are undergoing a rupee depreciation crisis. And under the rupee depreciation crisis, Indian rupee is losing its value. So, this currency swap agreement allows the country to exchange our currency and get US dollars or Japanese yen. So in that case, this will bring greater stability to the foreign exchange of the country. And it will also help in bringing stability to the capital market of the country. When the rupee is stable, the capital market automatically becomes stable. So depreciation of rupee and capital market are directly linked. So in that way, bringing greater stability to the foreign exchange will bring in better stability to the capital market in the country. And it also helps in meeting the short-term liquidity mismatches in the Indian market. And by meeting the liquidity mismatches, it improves the confidence in the Indian market. The Indian market will become more stable. So when the confidence of the market is improved, it will curb the speculative pressure on the rupee. So there can be speculations that the value of rupee will come down, and this will lead to fall in the market value of commodities or the rupee itself. So improving the confidence in the Indian market will help in curb the speculative pressure on the rupee, and therefore the foreign investments will also improve. When the market is stable, there will be more investments coming into the market. So when foreign investment increases, there will be more demand for Indian rupee, and this will appreciate the value of rupee. Now we are going through a phase of rupee depreciation, and during the rupee depreciation period, what happens is the Reserve Bank of India will have to use the reserves of the bank in order to meet the foreign exchange liability. So what happens when RBI uses its reserves to meet the liabilities, the reserves will come down. But under the currency swap agreement, a country can use the provision of currency swap, that is, India can borrow money from Japan in terms of US dollars or in terms of yen. So what happens? The reserve will be stable. This will provide better stability to the foreign exchange reserves of the country and also to the stabilization of the value of rupee. Now let us understand what was the background in which the currency swap agreement was signed. So this currency swap agreement between Japan and India comes as an attempt to stabilize the falling value of rupee. And what were the reasons or factors that triggered the rupee depreciation or falling value of rupee? One was the increase in the price of crude oil. The second was geopolitical tensions. The third was the tightening monetary policy in the developed economies. Another reason was the trade war. So all these external factors had led to the depreciation of rupee. The demand for Indian rupee came down and it led to further depreciation of the rupee. And as we have discussed, when the value of rupee comes down, that is when Indian rupee undergoes a depreciation, what happens? The RBI will use its foreign exchange reserves in order to meet the short-term liabilities. So what happens to the reserves of the RBI during a rupee depreciation period? The foreign exchange reserves will deplete. And in the last 6 months, we have seen that the foreign exchange reserves of the RBI has depleted by $33 billion. Now, a currency swap agreement can help in stabilizing the reserves of the Reserve Bank of India, because now when there is a provision for currency swap agreement, the RBI need not take its reserves to meet the short-term liabilities, but we can use the provision of currency swap and then we can get US dollars or Japanese yen in order to meet the short-term liabilities. So reserves will become more stable, and this will also lessen or bring down the impact of rupee depreciation. Now let us understand what are the steps taken by the central government in order to bring down the impact of rupee depreciation. The first one was restricting some non-priority imports, and this was done through increasing the import duty. By increasing the import duty, the central government has attempted to decrease the import of commodities which are not very relevant or very important. When the import duty goes up, imports become more expensive, and when the value of imports increases, the quantity demanded will come down. So this is a basic theory. When price increases, the quantity demanded comes down. So by increasing the import duty, the price or the value of the imports increased, and therefore the quantity demanded of the imports also came down. The second one was to ease the overseas borrowing norms. The government had eased the conditions for external commercial borrowings. So by doing this, the borrowings from outside, overseas borrowings will increase, and this increased overseas borrowings will help increase the flow of foreign exchange into the country. So the government also eased the overseas borrowing norms. And thirdly, it also relaxed rules for masala bonds. What is masala bonds? They are rupee denominated bonds. In addition to all these steps, the Reserve Bank of India has also taken a lot of steps like introduction of NRI bonds, conducting open market operations, and through the open market operations, the government securities were purchased from the public. So all these steps were taken by the center as well as by the monetary authority, that is the RBI. Now the center has entered into a currency swap agreement, and this agreement is between two central banks, that is the Central Bank of India, RBI, and the Japanese central bank. So this will help in support the rupee in a phase of depreciation. Now if we look at the depreciation of rupee, it has hard hit the Indian importers because imports became expensive. Now the importers will have to pay more in terms of rupee because rupee has lost its value, and also the companies with extensive overseas borrowings. These companies also felt it hard to repay the loans. So the importers and the companies which had huge overseas borrowings were the hardest hit during this phase of depreciation of rupee. So therefore the center must maintain its efforts to support the rupee. So it is doing many ways in order to support the rupee, and the center can also think about entering into currency swap agreements with other countries as well. You can find the PDF of this lecture on my Facebook page. Thank you, and I wish you all a very good day.